and delighted to be here today with my dear friend Maria Price, who is going to discuss her memoir, Love You Still, with us. I just want to give a quick trigger warning and a heads up that this special episode today is going to be discussing infant and pregnancy loss, which October is Infant and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month internationally. And so this is a very sensitive and difficult topic to discuss, especially for people like Maria and myself who have personally experienced it. So I just want to give a quick warning up front that if you have kids listening, this would probably be a good time to pop in a movie or pop in your earbuds because we will be discussing the difficult experience of stillbirth. So we'll just go ahead and say that up front. So one thing, first of all, Maria, thank you so much just for being here today and for, being brave to come on this show and talk with me about such a difficult and heart-rending experience. I'm so appreciative.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I very much appreciate being able to talk to you about this.
Let me show your book cover here in the stream. Sure. So Love You Still, a memoir by Maria Price. And the first thing that I was saying to Maria earlier today before we hopped on is it suddenly hit me. I thought, this book really needs Kleenex to accompany it. And I was teasing her that I said, if you haven't reached out to, Kleenex or Puffs yet, like you might just want to see what sponsorship or, partnership opportunities might be available. So if Kleenex or Puffs, anyone, any reps are watching or anything, just could potentially be a thing because it could have one of those special little travel packages of Kleenex to go along with this book because it is so moving. It is so beautiful and lyrical the way that Maria writes about such a difficult experience. And even when she's writing about more positive, beautiful things like her wonderful supportive relationship with her husband, Joe, I still find that it's sort of bringing me to tears. So need that Kleenex. May want to look into that. That's all I'm saying.
We'll check into that. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So Maria, let's talk a little bit about how you and I met.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jane, so you and I met a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago now, I guess. And so at church, and I just remember kind of you and your children walking in and, kind of sitting across the aisle from where I, was sitting. And toward the end, there was kind of a call to prayer and just kind of an invitation to pray with, people. And I just kind of felt compelled to just kind of go over and introduce myself. And we just kind of, I think, had this kind of instant connection, and we're able to talk about our children and how we both had daughters named Julia. And so then,
and I noticed your necklace.
Yep. And so I noticed my necklace that has my Julia's photo on it. And so we started talking about it. And I always feel a little apprehensive about, kind of talking and about my children, because some people will ask, how many children do you have? And I'll tell them that I have 3. But then they only see 2, kind of around me. And so I just want to make sure that it's clear. And so I just told you that she was in heaven, and we just kind of were able to talk about that a little bit and our mutual kind of experiences. And it was just kind of this instant connection. And
it definitely was.
Yeah.
I can definitely just confirm that too. We were sort of instructed to, talk with each other and pray for each other, ask what was going on, in each other's weeks. And when I noticed Maria's beautiful necklace in this heart shape, and it almost looked like, it had this cherub on it. And I just thought, oh, what is that? That's beautiful. And so then in asking her about it and finding out about her daughter, Julia, and I have a daughter, Julia, as well, who's living. And so we were talking about that. And Maria let me know, that her daughter had, passed at birth. or before birth, I guess I should say, that her daughter was stillborn. And I immediately found myself telling Maria about my own pregnancy loss experience, which I had a miscarriage with my first pregnancy. And even though it was very early on, it was one of the most difficult things emotionally and spiritually that I've ever been through. And so we just immediately bonded and connected over that sense of loss and over the sense that one child does not replace another child, even if you have other living children and are blessed by them, that still doesn't erase the pain and the loss of another pregnancy or another child. So it really did feel, again, very God inspired, God directed, for sure. It just felt like I was meant to be there with you. And I feel like almost instantly too, like, and it's not that I was trying to like press this on you or anything, but I remember saying, like, have you ever thought about like writing a book? Or like, I thought about writing a book about miscarriage and, trying to help other people with that experience. And, have you ever thought about that? And I remember you kind of being like, well, like, I don't know, like me, I don't even remember. What was your response? Do you remember?
I think I had just kind of recently started sharing some writing that I had done, which is pretty out of character for me. It wasn't something that I was super comfortable with, but I almost, again, just kind of felt like it was the right thing to do. Like it just felt like something that I needed to get out. And so, so I think we shared that, and that was something that I had been doing recently, and that, I'd had some, nice feedback on that. But that was definitely all the farther that I felt comfortable with at that time.
Well, and so Maria and I bonded, and I feel like, became instant friends with a very special connection. And then I happened to see, I think it was an ad on Facebook for a potential writer's retreat out in Vermont at a place called When Words Count. And so I applied for that and actually won that retreat. And I was trying to think about who I should take with me. And Maria came to mind because I thought, even if she doesn't want to write, like, I could see this just being a good getaway for her personally, just to be able to go and have a little bit of personal space. Maria has two other young children, young boys that she's raising. And so she's got a lot on her plate. And I just thought that could provide, some good space and getaway for you. And so was that kind of how you felt about it too initially?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was in the kind of the middle of a really tough year, not only of course personally, but then even just professionally, and just it was a really difficult time. And so, having the opportunity to just get away and have kind of a vacation in a quiet, kind of serene place with this historic, beautiful, landscape. I thought, that could be a really great opportunity for me just to be able to write, because at that time writing was just a really great outlet for me. And it was a way that I was processing and working through everything. But that can be difficult to do with all of the other kind of life pressures that we experience in the day-to-day. So having an opportunity to get away and have some quiet time to myself was very appealing. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm so glad. And I'm so glad just that we took that first step, toward, this journey to your eventual finished book. And I think I can remember, I want to make sure I'm not like putting words in your mouth, but I feel like at first too, once we got out there, you were a little hesitant, kind of like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't consider myself a writer. Like, here I am at this writer's retreat. Like, I feel like I remember you coming over to my room and us like sitting down and having a conversation about this. Do you remember that too?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think even before I left, I just told Joe, like, what am I doing? I'm not going to this thing. I'm not a writer. Like, I'm just going, I just want to go to get away. But what if, like, they ask me to read something that I wrote? Like, I can't do that in front of other people. And so I was terrified of all of that. And so it was definitely kind of a, getting over that kind of thing. And then, even getting up there, I just remember, sitting around the dinner table of this, beautiful historic, farmhouse and this fine dining, and just thinking, what am I doing here? Like,
Amber's amazing.
Legit. Like, I do not belong here. But everyone was so kind. And, I have to give a shout out to Steve Eisner, the CEO of When Words Count. And he was just so fantastic, and we're just sitting over dinner, and he's, asking everybody kind of what they're working on. And I'm just saying, well, I'm not really here to write a book. I'm just here to write and to process and to heal and to kind of work through that. And, he said, okay, well, tell me about your story. And so we were kind of talking about it some more. And he, was talking to me a little bit more later and said, was referencing my book. And I said, oh no, I'm not here to write a book. He said, I think you should consider writing a book. And he said, I think it would help a lot of people. And that was just some really nice kind of validation. At that point, he hadn't heard any, of my writing at all and whatever. But I think just to know the power of a story. Huge thanks to Steve and to you and to just everyone that was a part of that process. It was a really amazing experience I'll never forget.
Well, you are so welcome. And I'm so glad that you were there and that you came with me on that journey and that you got, some helpful, I think, support and encouragement for essentially other people seeing in you, like, we think you have a story here. You have something that, again, that not only, could help you and your healing process as far as the writing of it, but could also help many other people. And I think I recall Steve even saying almost like, this is not a topic that's discussed a lot. There are not a lot of books out there about this. And was that something that you found when you had this experience?
It was. So I think, when we were fresh in grief, and had come home from the hospital with empty arms, I just was looking for something to help me to understand what had happened, help me to process, what even just happened to me. And, this was such a completely unexpected turn of events. And I think I was looking for a book like Love You Still. And I, not that there aren't, beautiful people who are telling their stories, but at that time, I didn't find what I was looking for, someone who could say, yes, I experienced this too, and these are the feelings that I have. And, you are having these same experiences, and that's normal, or that's expected. And so I felt very much alone in that. And I think because, stillbirth and miscarriage and, infant and pregnancy loss is such a taboo topic still in our society that it just kind of perpetuates that shame and that feeling of I must have done something wrong and it must be me and it must be my fault. And all of those terrible things that just kind of compound the already existing grief. And so, I think what we've always said is, Love You Still is the book that no mother would ever want to write. No parent ever wants to have the experience to be able to write a book like this. But I feel humbled and honored to be able to tell our story, and in the hopes that it would help someone else to not feel as alone as I did.
Well, and I think you hit on something really important there that I think often after people have gone through such a difficult experience with infant and pregnancy loss, that it's like you naturally go looking for other people who've had this experience to know that you aren't alone in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I had found a message board online at the time that was, trying to conceive after miscarriage. And then also there was pregnant after a loss as well. And so some of the women would almost graduate, from the trying to conceive after miscarriage to the pregnant after a loss. And that, again, there are different challenges, present in both, experiences. But those groups were like a lifeline to me.
Absolutely.
Just being able to find other women who, obviously there are all kinds of losses and at all kinds of, different stages of pregnancy. But when you find yourself in someone else's story, when it's like, oh, like for me, this person also had like a 6-week, pregnancy loss and, and that kind of thing, that it just makes you feel not so alone and not so isolated in that. And again, just being able to reach out and message, with other people. So I can understand why you would immediately go looking for, you're looking for comfort, and you're looking for, solidarity, and you're looking for understanding, and from people who've been through it so they know what it's like, not just necessarily like well-meaning, friends and family who they love you and they care and they're sorry, but they don't really know what to say.
Right. Absolutely. And I'll say, it was really kind of an eye opener for me. When we announced, that we had suddenly and unexpectedly, lost Julia, so close to, our due date and everything. We had so much incredible support, and we, just from every kind of direction, which was amazing. And, I have to acknowledge it's not everyone's story. So I'm so grateful for that. And I think one thing that really struck me then, and even now, is how many women that I had known for years who had come to me and said, this happened to me too. I lost a baby too. And I had known them for years, but I had never known that they had experienced that before. And, I think as we, began to share and began to kind of work through those things together, there was some kind of mutual help that we were able to provide for each other in just sharing a story, and I think that's so powerful. And I think kind of almost propelled and encouraged me to tell more, even in those early stages before I was even, ready to consider a book, just kind of sharing on social media and people saying, this happened to me too. I'm so grateful that you shared this experience. I have a dear friend that has shared with me that she had lost her son, and in much a similar experience. And it had been decades, 40 or so years. And she said, I think about him every day. I miss him every day. And they didn't, things have changed a lot in, thankfully, in the time since then. But she said they didn't let me hold him. They didn't let me see him. And so I hope that this story will also be some support to women of all different experiences, because it's hard enough to experience the loss of your baby, but then when you feel like you can't talk about it and you feel like you can't say your child's name, that should never happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You make such wonderful points with everything that you're saying. And I guess I'd just like to add to that too, that I also found that I was in a workplace situation where I was just in conversation with other women, and one of them had mentioned one day, like, yeah, it's kind of a rough day today, and we were just kind of like, oh yeah, and she was like, yeah, it was my baby's due date today.
Mm.
And because she had the courage to say that, it then gave me the courage. This was years ago, and this was at the point where I really hadn't, no one other than like close friends and family knew about it. I had just kept it to myself, and I didn't want people at work to know. It was just too, just too painful and too raw. But when this person, had the courage to say that, it really did it unlocked something in me, and it unlocked something in the other people at the table, I think, too. And I've been in other situations like that since, too, where someone will share, an experience, that they had a miscarriage or a stillbirth or a pregnancy loss. And I had a very similar thing, like you're saying, happen, where suddenly it was like most of the women at the table then were sharing, a woman had said that, she and her husband were trying to conceive, and they'd had a miscarriage. And so we were talking about like our Christmas wishes or something. And this was at like a church program. And she was like, well, my wish, for next year is, to be pregnant again, with a healthy baby. And then other people were saying, oh my gosh, I've gone through that too. Like, as we were going around sharing our Christmas wishes, suddenly it became, unlocking this really, difficult thing. And so I think so many times too, it's, and, I've thought about this as a, potential book title, but it's a silent sisterhood. It's a group that you don't know that you're part of until, someone has the courage to speak about it. And then it unlocks the conversation. And I think that's what can be so positive about it, is then being able to share. And again, just, it removes so much of that stigma and that isolation and that solo grief. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just really shining a light on a problem that's already there. I mean, we know, you mentioned before that October is Infant and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month. And we know that 1 in 4 pregnancies in the United States ends in loss. And so it's not that this isn't happening, it's just that we're not talking about it. Steve Rohr, who was one of my judges for the When Words Count Pitch Week competition, said it so beautifully. I think he said, it's just unspeakable. It's an unspeakable tragedy. It's so difficult to talk about. And so I hope that having conversations like the one that we're having today, and that's one of, my hopes for the book, is that we'll bring some awareness and unlock that conversation so that people will kind of normalize that and recognize that it is something that's happening. And you probably do know people who have experienced this kind of pain, whether they're talking about it or not. And so giving them the gift and the opportunity to say their child's name or to talk about their child is really a precious gift that we can give to each other, and that we need to start giving to each other more.
I agree. I totally agree with that. And did you find after your experience that did you seek out, other, pregnancy and infant loss, groups? Were you able to find other individuals and things to talk to about this?
I did. So I was really fortunate, really blessed to be able to be a part of a few different groups. I think you mentioned, online support groups, and that was really where I landed at first, because it's a little bit easier to know that, you have at least the screen dividing you between yourself and then other people. And so the first group that I found is Bearing Hope, and it's a local group that was started by Liv Ryan, who is a brave and wonderful woman and author, speaker, and so I was able to kind of connect with them online first, and then was able to attend my first meeting. And I guess I would just encourage, and I don't know if this is an appropriate place to talk about this or not, but just to encourage, other people who are experiencing this kind of loss. And I know that other people have kind of said, oh, I just don't know if I could go, to a support group, because I would probably just cry the whole time. And I'm going to tell you, I cried the entire, not even just a little tear, ugly cried the entire time. So thank you to all of those ladies. I don't know if any of them are watching right now. But I absolutely did the entire time. And they could just not have been more kind and gentle and saying, we were where you are and we get it. And there's something really powerful about that, And so I think I've been to a couple of other groups, No Foot Too Small, and, just different other groups that have been so kind and so generous in their compassion and their empathy. And so it was really a terrifying, kind of intimidating experience before, but I'm so glad and such a huge proponent for finding a group that you can connect with, whether it's online or in person. I think it's really powerful to be able to share and to hear other people's stories too.
Did the folks at those groups, did they have any helpful suggestions for you on walking through your grief that you knew maybe that you could trust a bit more, or you felt a bit more comfortable with because you knew that these people had experienced, what you had? Did they have any helpful suggestions for you at the time?
I would say probably the loudest message that I heard was, it's okay to not be okay. And it is okay to ugly cry, and it is okay to take a break when you need to, and to be gentle with yourself, and to give yourself grace. And, you don't have to, we lost Julia around the time right now. So October 11th. And so not very much longer after that, it was, the holiday season kind of kicked off. And, I was really blessed by people like them, and also even, medical professionals who just said, you don't have to cook a full course meal, for Christmas this year, and, maybe let somebody else do that. And, recognize that you need to take care of yourself, and that grief isn't a bad thing, that grief is actually a very healthy thing. And it's something that you need to let yourself go through. And, kind of whatever that looks like for you might be different than what it looks like for somebody else. And that's okay too. And, but just kind of taking care of yourself and recognizing that, going through the grief is going to be probably a lifelong process. It's not something that, is just this linear thing of like, okay, one day I'm just fine. It's always going to be there. And just finding ways to cope with it and to get stronger is more the goal than getting past it.
Great point. Mm-hmm. Stronger rather than getting past it. I love
mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I feel that that's something, you write very candidly about, all of your experiences in the book, but that is something that you write very candidly about, that it's like, so it's Christmas time. I used to love Christmas, and like, I am just not feeling it. Like, I am not feeling it this year. And you too, talk about people reaching out to you, leaving messages or letting you know that they cared, or inviting you like, oh, hey, let's catch up sometime. And just admitting like, I was not ready to return those calls. I was not, I appreciated that people cared, but, so is that something that you'd recommend too for people who are, supporting a grieving person? That,
yes. Yes, very much so. And so I think, I think it's hard for us. It was hard for me. And I think that, a lot of women probably struggle, not just women, I suppose, but a lot of people struggle with kind of that people pleasing tendency and, not wanting to offend someone else or whatever. But I would always kind of feel bad about, not accepting an offer, or, going to coffee or doing whatever. But I just always tried to let them know, thank you for asking me. I just can't right now, or, whatever it was. And I would just say, for people who are supporting someone who is grieving, to please continue to ask and continue to do what you can. And please don't be offended when someone just can't right now. It doesn't mean that they won't be ready to later. So that it's not anything personal, but that it's just something that they also need to keep in mind, to protect themselves and to kind of be able to get through that fresh grief, especially.
Yeah. No, that's a great tip, I think, too, like you said, to just know that, give them space,
Mm-hmm.
and honor that space, but
Mm-hmm.
also to not stop asking.
Right.
No.
Yes, exactly.
So that's a good point. So, obviously this was a very, very shocking experience in your life. I just sort of want to quickly summarize that, just for people who aren't familiar with you and
Mm-hmm.
your story. But so Maria was, toward the end of her pregnancy, and she had gone for a checkup. And if I'm getting anything wrong, please tell me. But she had a bit of a concern because she hadn't felt movement in a little while, and so when she went in after she hadn't felt movement, then they had discovered that her daughter Julia had passed. And when was Julia's actual due date, Maria?
So her due date was October um, October 19th.
October 19th.
Yes, October 19th. Sorry, I
So,
had to think about it.
oh no, it's okay. So Maria was only about a little over a week out from
Mm-hmm.
her due date, with a healthy baby, healthy, as I know you always call it,
Mm-hmm.
textbook pregnancy,
Mm-hmm.
no complications, um, everything seeming to be in order. And so this had to just be, I mean, again, I can't even imagine, just the shock that you and your
Mm-hmm.
family felt in going through this. And then
Mm-hmm.
having to tell your family too, who's just the terrible and odd pain of, people are expecting calls from you at this time saying, oh, we had Julia, everything's great, and then having to make really heartbreaking phone calls instead. So can you
Yeah.
talk just a little bit about that shock, and sharing with your family and friends?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think you hit it exactly. So we'd planned to do an induction on the 13th. So on a Thursday, and we had the appointment. Our final checkup was on Monday afternoon, late afternoon, and everything was perfect. We had, an ultrasound and a non-stress test, and a physical examination from the doctor, and everything was perfect. And so that was Monday afternoon, evening. By the time we left, and I woke up Tuesday morning and was not feeling movement, and so yeah, you're exactly right. I think my family was all just, I'd let them know the night before, everything was good. She looks fantastic. And so everyone was completely shocked when we had to make those phone calls on Tuesday afternoon. And um, it was just um, not anything that you ever just expect to do. I mean, you don't expect to, like, how do you find the words to say the thing that you can't even really process yet? I mean, we had just um, seen the ultrasound, and we had just been through that experience, but it wasn't really real, I think, to us yet either. She was still inside of me, and I'm making these phone calls to tell people that she was gone, and it was an awful, awful experience to have to know that, not only am I feeling this trauma and this pain that can't even put into words, but then how am I, supposed to put that on someone else? It was awful. Yeah.
And I mean, I think, like you were saying earlier too, kind of the like unspeakable, unthinkable, like it's it's just so tragic, and it doesn't make sense, I think, to our logical minds, when it's like,
Mhm.
wait a minute, like this whole thing has been fine. Like this
Mhm.
baby was fine. We just had this checkup the day before.
Mhm.
Everything is fine. Like how, I mean, I could see where it would be really hard to accept, that reality. Obviously it's so emotionally painful, but it's also just, it seems so illogical
Right.
too.
Right. Exactly. And then I think, your brain does such funny things when it's affected by trauma, and when, you're put in that situation where it just doesn't make sense. And so, um, so there was a lot of shock, and there was a lot of, our doctor was amazing. I just could not have been more wonderful. But I just remember, um, just asking her, just telling her to just, induce me right now. Like, let's take her now. And that'll, like, there just has to be some way to make this better. And, I think being in that place of recognizing that there is nothing that we can do, medically to revive her or to make this better, um, was so shocking, and such a huge blow, to be able to even wrap my mind around, I think, at that time.
Well, and then knowing that you had lost your daughter, and then you still had to go through the experience of childbirth as well on top of it, which is so traumatic. And again, I feel like you capture that so well in the book of, them telling you, like, you will need all of your strength to get through this, and encouraging you, to go eat something and come back. And again, just the way that you describe your feelings, and the way that you describe, running into someone that you knew and not even wanting to tell this person, because it's like, I can't even go there. Like, I
Right.
can't even go there. I'm not even going to tell you, like, yep, I've got a cold. So yeah, that's all
Right.
it is. I'm fine, because it was just so emotionally, devastating.
Yeah.
So I know too that once you went through that experience, I know, that you and your husband Joe were still, hoping and praying, for a miracle. That, I know you talk about, giving birth to her, and pulling her right up onto your chest, trying to get her as close to you as possible, and just thinking of, almost like kangaroo care, in NICUs and things like that. That, because again, sometimes miraculous things do happen. And I can understand, that instinct, motherly instinct, and desire, for that miracle to happen. And so again, I think those are just, I'm sort of just talking about this, but just kind of trying to muse on, some of the things that I think you capture so well in the book. And, um, you know, an irony is, I think that Maria does not, or maybe did not, consider herself a writer, but um, this book is just so well written, and so, hauntingly beautiful. And I know that when I was reading it, it's like I felt like I was right there with you the entire time, experiencing what you did, or that I was in, that hospital room with you. And I think that it takes, such a gifted writer to be able to do that, and bring us into your experience, and allow us, that openness and vulnerability to feel your pain, and as close as we can come to understanding it, to walk through that with you. So it's just a tremendous story.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you. I'm really grateful to have had such amazing support from you, and from, I just have to give a shout out also to Peg Moran, my amazing, amazing, amazing editor. I um, am so grateful for her, and for Woodhull Press, and just all of the people who have taught me so much. I think about being a writer. I know we had, many conversations. I'm not a writer. Like, I don't even know what am I even doing? I'm a mom. I'm a teacher. These things. I'm not a writer. And so, having the opportunity, and just, I believe, calling, to be able to do this, has been a really humbling experience. And I think, terrifying experience at times, when we're talking about kind of those really vulnerable and raw moments. But I think one of the commitments that I tried to make early on was that, as difficult as it is to write and to re-experience again and again and again, I wanted to be real. If one of our purposes is to help other women, and other families to be able to see themselves in our story, I want to portray what actually happened. And so we tried to be really honest in our telling of the story. And so I'm just really grateful for all of the people who've helped to make that happen.
That's great. And I know too that I feel like I remember you telling me before that in some cases, you needed to go back to your family, like to your husband and your mom and, other people to find out almost like, hey, so what happened in this moment? Can you talk about the moment in the hospital that happened after Julia's birth?
Sure. Yeah. So we were really, again, just so blessed to be able to have an amazing medical team, and they were so supportive in just kind of every way. And they just encouraged us to call in our family and to allow them time with Julia, and that we could all have an opportunity to hold her. And Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep is an amazing nonprofit organization that provides photographers to come in and do newborn portraiture for families who have experienced loss. And so we kind of had all of that kind of going on around us. I just, I'm not really sure a lot, even still, about everything, minute by minute, kind of what happened. But I just remember feeling really warm, really hot. And apparently I just stopped talking and I had lost consciousness. They cleared the room, and, when I woke up, there were lots of nurses around me and, kind of doing all of the things. And nobody else was in there. And so, kind of once I kind of came out of, whatever, I recognized where I was and what was happening. And, and I was terrified because Julia wasn't there. And, but, my mom had her. And so she still had her outside of our room. And so the nurse just then explained that, they'd kind of done everything that they knew to do physically, and there was nothing physically that they could find that was wrong, and that they had called in the doctor, and that the doctor had explained that it was just my heart and my mind, trying to kind of catch up with my body and what all had happened. And yeah, so I'd never had anything like that happen to me before. And I think, I remembered the experience, but clearly I didn't remember all of the details. And I just remember, having those conversations with the people who had been there and thinking like it was a minute or two. And, my husband explaining, no, it was much longer than that, and it was much more, scary to kind of be the one who was awake and watching this happen. And him not knowing, he had just lost his daughter. Was he also losing his wife in that same moment, or in that same evening? And so a really amazing, again, how the brain kind of processes and works through trauma. And so just really grateful to be able to have people in my life who have always been, so supportive and so kind, and just to be able to kind of go back to them and say, tell me about this and what this really looked like. So
how long was that, Maria, that you were unconscious? Like, what does Joe or your family tell you?
Yeah, so I think it was more closer to about 10 minutes or so. I'm not 100% sure, to be perfectly honest. I think for them too, it was also this really traumatic experience of kind of not knowing what was happening and how to kind of deal with it. And so, I'm sure that time kind of didn't really process in the same way that, that it would normally for them either. So, but I think it was closer to that. I mean, to me, it was instantaneous. So it felt like it was, again, a minute or two, but it was longer. So.
Well, and again, I think that's, I think you capture, all of your experience really beautifully, but again, the fear, that, that your husband was feeling, and I'm sure, the rest of your family too, just like you said, of like, oh my goodness, I just lost my daughter and now am I going to lose my wife too? And the way that you write about that in the book and sharing, his emotions and all of that, that's, again, it's just so heartrending, for sure.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Well, and so, obviously, the book walks through, your experience after, after all of this happened. And then, going through, Julia's funeral and burial and, having to go through all that. And like I said, I remember reading that section and just, again, feeling like I was standing there with you and imagining, that I could just feel how you must have felt in those moments, because you described that in such a rich and relatable way, that I think that's one of the, the true, gifts that you bring to the reader, in the book is just being able to allow us in, to such difficult moments with you and feel like we're right there.
Thank you so much. That's very kind.
I don't know exactly how you did that, from a writing perspective. And I'd love to ask you a little bit more about that as far as, the writing process and how, like, what is your writing process and how were you able to go back into these, these really deep, dark and difficult moments and be able to write about them in such a descriptive and, again, evocative way that really just brings it to life for the reader.
Well, that's so kind. Thank you so much for saying all of those things. So I have to say again, I feel like such an amateur in the sense that which I don't know, maybe I'm not supposed to say that.
Okay, here's the thing that I have to say right away. Okay, because I wanted to say this anyway. All right. So here's the thing. Maria thinks she's not a writer, right? Or, at least, maybe now that you have a book to your name, you'll stop saying that. Okay. But I am a writer. I went to school and, majored in English writing. I've been one of those people that like, oh, I always have felt like a writer, blah, blah. I've edited other people's books and I've read a lot of people's work. I've been in workshops. I've read other people's writing, whatever. Okay. So and I know I've told you this before, but when I read, the first draft of your book that you shared with me, when you were doing the When Words Count, book pitch contest and all that, and you shared that with me and you were like, is this okay? Like, oh my gosh, I haven't really done this, blah, blah, blah. And honest to God, like, not saying this because Maria and I are friends, like truly from my heart, Maria's writing in a first draft, it felt like a final draft to me. Her writing is that good. And I've read a lot of other people's writing. No, I have to say this because I've read a lot of other people's writing. I know what good writing is.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's the whole, like, to me, a writer is someone who writes. A writer is someone who is brave enough to share their story.
Mm-hmm.
A writer is someone who, does the work and completes it, and you have done all those things. But like I said, I think that you tremendously underestimate your gift, as we all probably tend to do about ourselves, and it takes other people to tell you, like, no, really, no, seriously, like, really, you're great. Like, but like I said, I say that with all sincerity that when I read Maria's, and again, I don't know how long, in the works it was at the point that I read what you felt like was the first draft. But to me, it was definitely like semi-final form for sure. Like it was very close to being, very polished and well put together. So just have to clarify that. So you are a writer, whether you want to be or not. I'm sorry, you're part of the group.
You're very kind. Thank you very much.
You're very talented. And like I said, I just think that you capture, your experience in such a way, that makes it really relatable. And so, okay. So back to how you're an amateur and don't know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Well, very, very kind of you. Thank you very much for saying all of that. So I guess I kind of just feel like as far as a process and, kind of all of the like workshopping and all, I Googled like everything. What is workshopping? Like, what is all of the, like, I don't know. What are writers supposed to do? And so,
I love that.
So I would just say that, for me, digging back into those really difficult moments was a lot of time just kind of by myself and just kind of really just trying to put it out onto words. And I don't know, that's not really a great answer, but I think it was just a lot of living and reliving kind of those moments and then just trying to express that on into words and then just kind of going from there and figuring out where that would take me after that.
Did you have journals, Maria, that you worked with?
Yeah, so yes and no. So originally when I started writing, Fresh in Grief, like, days home from the hospital, it just felt like this, burning kind of inside of me, and I needed to get it out. And so I started writing usually more journal type entries, like letters to Julia. And I would just kind of tell her, what I was thinking, what I was feeling. And so that's kind of how it started. And so that was something that I was able to kind of look back on and kind of fill in some of those gaps as far as, details and things like that too, which was really helpful.
Okay, so when I hear letters to Julia, you can imagine what I'm thinking. But I could see something like that being really helpful too, for bereaved parents, seeing someone else's writing, to their child. And
and for me, it made sense. It made more sense to me than, writing to just no one or, writing to a future self or something. There were so many things that I, had wanted to share with her and so many things that I'd wanted to show her in life. And so it just kind of made sense to me to be able to talk to her in that way. And I think that was something that helped me, was to be able to do the thing that made sense to me. I think sometimes people will, give suggestions that work for them, and that's great. And I recognize that, what worked for me is not going to work for everyone. But for me, that made sense. And I think being able to just kind of honor that and do the thing that is going to help, at least with that grieving process, is the right thing to do. Obviously, as long as it's, healthy and not, dangerous or anything like that. So.
Would you ever consider that as maybe like another book option for you? Or do you feel like you need to put more of a cap on this experience? I mean, as much as you can,
Right.
Yeah.
So I've been so incredibly blessed with opportunities with Woodhall Press and with Ben Tanzer and When Words Count, and just all of the people who have been so kind in helping us to tell our story. And so I don't. I'm so grateful for them, and I very much believe that this was a calling, on my heart, and that this is something that I was meant to do. And so I'm, just trying to kind of walk in that. And so, if there is another opportunity, then, I'm not going to say no. But it's not something that I'm, actively pursuing right now. Right now, I'm just trying to kind of get through right now.
Right. Absolutely. So how long would you say that it took you to write the book?
So I agreed to participate in the When Words Count process and the pitch week in late March of 2019. And then our, competition was in August of 2020. And then I turned in my final manuscript in February or March 1st of 2021. So you could say that it was 2 years, but you have to remember that I'm a mom and a teacher and, kind of all of those things too. So I wouldn't say that I was, full-time writing all of, at that time, but over the course of those 2 years-ish was how long it took, I guess.
I can see that.
Trying to figure out the math and make sure.
Yeah, no,
on that.
yeah,
I think
no,
that's right. So yeah.
Well, but I think that's a good distinction though too, to say that just because you say, hey, I was working on this book for 2 years, it doesn't necessarily mean I sat down at a computer and I didn't get up for 2 years, because we have families and lives and careers and other things that we have to do. So that's a good thing. But when you did actually get writing, when you would have, time to yourself and, Joe would take the boys and things like this, did you feel that the writing like flowed pretty easily, or did you feel like, or did it depend on the day? And
I would say it depended on the day to a degree, and it depended on kind of what section I was working on, and was this the first time that I was kind of writing about a certain thing. So I mean, I think there were a lot of factors that went into that. I would say that there were a lot of times that it would just flow pretty easily. I would say that there were other times that it didn't, but I would say that that there was kind of a lot of emotion and apprehension. I would say that probably was a part of that. I will say I had a couple of friends that I was kind of working with in the later kind of stages, and I just said, like, I just can't do it. I can't sit down and write today. I need to. I have a deadline and I need to write. And they just gave me really great advice. Lisa, I don't know, Eva, if you guys are watching right now, but shout out to you guys, because they just said, maybe just sit down and write, and just, and even if it's 10 minutes, like, just give yourself 10 minutes to just sit down and write, and then see what happens. And so that was really great advice. I don't know, again, like, I didn't go to school for writing. Like I don't know if that's what your teachers tell you to do. Maybe that's like a very, kind of simple thing, but for me, it worked. And so for me, sometimes just saying, like, okay, I'm going to sit down at my computer, and if nothing happens, then okay, but, I'm going to at least, make that conscious effort. And so, so that did help at times when I just kind of felt probably less of, a block as far as the writing, and more just a block, kind of more emotionally than anything.
So that goes into my next question. So then how were you able to write this book and relive these really difficult emotional experiences and not feel too pulled down by that, not feel overwhelmed by it? Like, what worked for you to kind of keep it on a level that was manageable for you, and not something that you just felt like, I am drowning in this book and I'm not sure how I'm going to get out?
Yeah. Well, think that's complicated. I think to a degree, I was really, my husband is amazing, and he did give me so many days that I could just go and just not worry about, the kids and the dishes and the laundry and kind of all of those kind of everyday things. And so I was able to just kind of get away, whether it was to the library or, he would take the kids, and I was able to kind of do that. And so, I think being able to have, long periods of time where I could just kind of be alone with my thoughts and alone with, kind of the story, was helpful in that I didn't have to feel like, I had to also answer the phone or also, change a load of laundry in the middle of, this story. But then I think also, this is my story, and this is it's my past, but it's really also my present. It's not something that, I have, put on a shelf and not, thought about, or, I do relive this all the time. I do think about these, experiences all the time. And so, so even though it was difficult to relive those, the details of those moments, there was also a lot of kind of healing that came in with that, and just being able to recognize, that these were things that happened, and that even, in the very difficult moments, that there were always kind of other people and, various things that were blessings in that too, and so I think it was an opportunity to be able to say, okay, this thing that I live with that is always, always here, to be able to put it, into words was really a blessing for me too.
That's really interesting. And I just had written something down the other day saying that, I don't want to continue to just ruminate on all of these, experiences and not, write about them. And so I don't know. I don't know if that's a potential suggestion, for people who are, healing from difficult experiences or trauma, that it's almost like if you're ruminating about it, you might as well write about it and try to, again, like try to get it out, try to process it, try to, create beauty from ashes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that really, has become a big part of the story for me, of the telling of the story for me, is just being able to recognize that there are, beautiful moments intermixed to all of it. And, my, so I'm not sure if this is the right place, but you can tell me if it's not the right place to tell it. But so my therapist, who is amazing. And, I write about some of our conversations in the book as well. But she had shared with me a couple of times, we clearly this is something that we talk about, and just kind of the book and the process and kind of all of it. And how it's really so far outside of my comfort zone that I really consider myself to be much more, introverted person, and I not necessarily one to share, a lot of personal kind of things necessarily. I'm at least not, to this degree, to this wide of an audience for sure. And so, but she, we've just had a lot of conversations about that. And she just really kind of compared it to the birthing process. And she said, it's like you just have this inside of you that just needs to come out. Like it's wanting to come out. And you feel like that really is on target, that it just, that's really how it feels, is that it just is this, this kind of birthing process, and it's painful at times for sure. And it's long at times. But also it needs to happen. It needs to come out. And I hope that it will be a blessing to other people in its
I think it definitely will. I think it definitely will for sure. And I guess I would just like to mention, a couple other aspects that we haven't really touched on yet is, so you use the phrase "love you still," several times throughout the book, and you use the word "still" in kind of poignant places throughout the book. And one thing that really comes through in your book is the strong love between you and your husband, and his support during such a difficult time for him as well. And so, can we just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So Joe is incredible, and I think the challenge, the challenge, I think, of writing sometimes, because whatever, they'll talk about characters and things like that, and how you have to make them rounded and whatever, and all of the different things, and like, does he have any bad qualities? Like, well, probably yes, but at least in these experiences, he really does kind of come through as a hero. And I would say that, not to be, mushy, but I would say that that's really what he has been to me. That's been my experience with him. He's just been, definitely that strong support throughout the loss of our daughter, and then also the writing of the book. And so I'm glad that you asked about this, because I think it is really important. And I think that's one thing that, in support groups and things like that, that gets brought up a lot, is that, the difference in, how because typically women are the ones that are in the support groups, and they're saying, that maybe their husbands or their partners are, dealing with the grief differently, or it doesn't seem like they, are kind of on the same page. And I hope that our story will help with that. And because I would say that Joe and I we didn't grieve the same, I would say, but we both grieved, and we both grieved equally. And so I think that that's a really important point. And I appreciate you saying that, that he also lost his daughter, and that, he also was grieving. And, but I think Joe really, takes on kind of that role as a protector. And so I think that's, again, something that I recognize as kind of a pattern in other people's stories too, is that, men very often will feel the need to help their partner, the ones who are, delivering this child, or who are carrying this child, and kind of going through the physical components of the experience. And, just kind of feeling helpless, and, being able to support them, as well as, dealing with the grief themselves. And so it really does become kind of this kind of complicated thing. But, for us, it was an experience where, something that very much could have taken us apart from each other really kind of deepened our commitment to each other, and helped us to really understand each other a little bit better. And that really, as much as the book is about my kind of enduring connection and love for Julia, it really is also a nod to the enduring love between my husband and I, and just that even in the moments when I would say I was not the most lovable, that he loved me still. And I'm very much grateful for that, and I hope that will ring through in the book as well.
I think it definitely does. And I can see why someone would say, like, does he have any flaws? Because the beautiful way that you write about him in the book, you can tell that he's definitely your emotional life raft, throughout the story. And that he is, kind and understanding and supportive. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned, just about you grieving differently. I know that there's a scene in the book, where you talk about that. So can you maybe talk a little bit about, sort of men and women grieving differently and how that applied in your life?
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, so this was our experience. And, I recognize that, I don't want to paint a broad brush and say that, all men and all women, but definitely I think that there are patterns that we see. And so, for me, I am a much more, kind of emotional person. And, I, talk a lot. And so it was very kind of demonstrative for me to, in my grief, and that I needed kind of all of the different experiences of, going to Julia's, gravesite and doing all of the things. And it was just always very much a part of my everyday. And Joe, I would say, is much more logical in his thinking. And he was able to say, as much as he, and I don't want to speak for him necessarily, but I know, that we'd had conversations that, that he knew that she was safe. He knew that she was loved. He knew that he would always love her and that he would always miss her and that he wished that she could be here. But that death did not separate him and his love from her and for her. And so, I wasn't quite at that space logically. I was angry and I was sad and all of those things. And so I just kind of exhibited those feelings, I would say, and those thoughts in just different ways. And whereas, again, I think that he not only felt the need to, to grieve, but then also to protect me and to, help me through, the feelings that I was feeling and taking care of, our older son and, putting him to bed and things like that when mommy was just not able to do that. And so, yeah, at times I think couples going through that process can get into that trap of feeling like, well, I am grieving and I am crying and I am upset. And so that means that I am grieving and I don't see you doing these things. So that means that you are not grieving. And that's not true.
And that's kind of what you called him on in the book. And again, but I mean, I think it's just, and I'm not saying that, to bring up anything controversial, sure. but more just because I think that's an understandable feeling to be like, dude, I am a mess. And why is it that it's like, it seems like you're okay. And then of course he was able to, explain to you like, yeah, I'm not really okay either. And I also really miss her. And this is really terrible for me too. But I think that was, a good conversation that you opened up, even though I know you're not really thrilled about, how that happened, but
yeah. But it was really painful. Yeah. It was very painful to experience. And then it's very painful and humbling, I would say, to write about. And yeah, so, but I think, again, if we are going to tell our story, I think it's important to be honest about it and to recognize that, that these feelings were, what I was feeling and these experiences did happen. And hopefully that will help other couples as well. On both sides, I would say, of that issue, to be able to understand each other a little bit better and just to recognize, that we, are on the same team. And I think sometimes we can isolate and we can, polarize kind of, and that's not healthy or helpful. And so being able to, be a support to each other is so important in a time when you feel like you don't know how you're going to take your next step.
Would you say that there were ways that you were able to support Joe as well that maybe don't come through as much in the book? Or was he mainly finding support, kind of, from other people at that time because he knew that you were just not in a place, to be able to offer support?
Yeah, I would say that we were able to talk about Julia in the different times, like that, that I kind of talk about in the book. And I think that was helpful. And I think, um, one of the things that we talked about and was something that you kind of mentioned before is that, again, like he was grieving. And so, but I think sometimes the thing that was overlooked often because when people would see us together or when people would call, they would call and check and, how I was doing, and that's partially because, physically I was the one who, delivered Julia and all of those things. And also because I was a mess, emotionally and demonstratively, like I, was very clearly not in a good place. And so they would call and check on me, or they would, ask how I was doing. And very often people, without, casting any blame or any, whatever on anyone, it's very easy sometimes to overlook the partner who seems to be doing fine. And so I think that was sometimes hard for him, is that, there were some people who were very kind about, checking in and seeing how he was doing. And I think that is so, so, so important because often, the partners are the ones, who are sleeping on the pull-out couch and in the hospital room. And they're the ones who are, going to the pharmacy to, fill prescriptions and doing all of the things. And often they are grieving just as much, but maybe just not in the same way. And so then it can be overlooked.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point too, that as hidden as infant and pregnancy loss are, for women, it's even more hidden for men, or other partners in the relationship. And I found that one day when I spoke at church and I mentioned about my miscarriage, and I actually had a man come up to me and say that he and his wife had experienced this, and he was clearly grieving and not in a great place about it. And so again, just feeling compassionate toward him too, of thinking like, yeah, nobody's really thinking about the other person in this relationship. And so so I hope too, just that that and again, like you said, the conversations that you had, and then also Joe finding support too, in different ways, because people grieve in different ways and approach things and need different things. And so it sounds too like a thing that really helped both of you was maybe just giving each other that space, but also staying connected and just sort of doing that hard work, the hard grieving work to work through it together. And again, that's just such again, one of the beautiful, gifts of the book is just seeing your marriage and the challenges that you had, and working through that and praying through that, and him praying when you were too angry to pray, and things like that. And so I think it's just a beautiful thing, and I'm so thankful that you had such a great support person through all of that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I agree with the, I don't know, I don't know Joe well, or personally, but the impression that I have, from him of reading the book is incredibly positive. And he does seem, again, quite like the gentle hero of the book, I think, for sure. So how does he feel about that?
I think so. As much as I feel like I'm an introvert, I would say Joe is just as much or more so, for sure. And so I think he just kind of is, you know, I think he finds a great deal of healing and help from being a support and doing things, and so doing those, dishes and the, childcare and kind of all of those
Like
different
the
things.
acts of service, love language kind of
Yeah,
a thing?
right. Yeah. And so I think kind of being able to do that. And I think he's very excited about the book and its potential to be able to help other families and, to be able to kind of bring some awareness um, to a topic that just needs to be talked about more. And so, yeah, I think he's very excited about that.
Good. So I alluded a little bit, just to the anger, that you felt, and I know you mentioned it. So, can you talk just a little bit more about how, being a person of faith and working through, such a difficult experience in which, the miracle that you prayed for unfortunately did not happen, and how do you work through that as a person of faith and wanting to wanting to be able to have a relationship with God?
Yeah. So, yeah. So I grew up, with an understanding of who God is, and that He is, interested and interested in an intimate relationship with people. And so I feel like I had a relationship with Him, and that I tried to live that out in my life before Julia. And um, so then I think when we um, found out that she had passed, so again unexpectedly, and um, it really was kind of this challenge to my faith or it felt like a challenge to my faith at that time of just like, God, how, that kind of classic question of, why do bad things happen? And I mean, clearly, we all have flaws and we all, are imperfect. But also, you feel like, well, I try to be a good person. I try to do all the things and I try to, whatever. And yet this really, really bad thing happened. And, I know that you could heal Julia. I know that you could have prevented this from happening in the first place. But you didn't. And so where do I go with that? What do I do with that? And that was really, 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 really difficult for me to be able to work through. And I think, um, became a major theme in the book because it was so much intertwined with the whole grieving process and saying like, God, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And what did I do something wrong? Am I being punished for for something, and all of the things that I think we our minds tend to go to because we're trying to kind of make sense of something. And I think clearly I'm not a grief counselor. I'm not a theologian or any of those things. But what I do know is that we live in a world that is very different from the one that it was created to be. We live in a world that is not the paradise that it was supposed to be. And that because of that, tragedy does happen. And I mean, we see that everywhere, right? We see it all over our world, unfortunately. And sometimes when tragedy touches our own lives, then the challenge is saying, um, God, I'll still trust you, even though I don't understand this. I don't understand why this happened, and not only that, and much less honestly that than um, the understanding of who he is, of who God is. And I would say through this experience, I have learned more of who he is, and that he is a loving father, and that he is close to the brokenhearted, and that he has provided a plan so that in Jesus, and that we could all find redemption and reconnection, as much as I desire to be, connected physically and with Julia, that he also loves and desires to be connected with us, and that that despite the disconnection that we might put there because of our anger, and because of our, whatever it is, that he loves us still, and that he is always ready and willing to reconcile that, and to be the father to hold us while we grieve. And so that has been, I hope, something that comes through in the book as well, is that it's very easy, I think, for people sometimes to maybe oversimplify and just try to have kind of a quick answer to crises of faith, and saying, well, God had a better way, or God, whatever. And I think we kind of address that in the book as well. And I think people have really great intentions, but I think sometimes theologically, maybe we get some things wrong. And I think really one of the things that we need to truly reflect on is just how much God loves us, and even when bad things happen. And so I've just been really, really grateful to have been able to share kind of our experience with that, because I think that it's something that a lot of people will say that they have experienced as well. And I think that sometimes there is some shame that can come along with people maybe saying, well, you didn't have enough faith, and you didn't have enough whatever. And I would say that that's not true. I would say that it takes a great deal of faith to ask questions, and we have a God who's big enough to handle that. So, sorry, that was a very long answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think you make a lot of great points there, and I know that that's something that definitely comes through in the book, is the message of that the love you still, has multiple meanings, that it's toward Julia, it's, for you and your husband, and it's for you and God, and that you felt, God saying that to you, as well, and that you characterize that, in the book, and describe that, of understanding that love for you, is also there. And again, that as you worked through your anger and your grief, that then eventually, you were able to hear that at a time, when you were able to accept it. And, but I also think you make a good point, and maybe that's something we could elaborate on a little bit, is how sometimes people say the wrong things, or people say things that they think are helpful to grieving people, but they're really not. Things like, either like the this was meant to be, or this wasn't meant to be, or like you said, the God has a plan, or I know you mentioned in the book, God needed another angel, or sometimes things that can be just tremendously, maybe well-meaning, but it can be tremendously hurtful, to people who are grieving the loss of a loved one. So is that something that you can talk about a little bit, of kind of the what to say, what not to say?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So I would say, just to preface, like I recognize that so many of the things that we say, so I have been just as guilty of saying some of these things as what, other people have been. But I think it comes from such a good place. It comes from a place of saying, I love you and I don't want to see you hurting anymore. And so I want to say something that's going to make you feel better.
Sure.
And so we say things like, well, she's in a better place. Which I understand. I understand that heaven is truly a better place than where we are right now. However, to me, the best place for my child is in my arms. And so telling me that she's in a better place is not super helpful to me right now. Or, just a number of different things, that God had a plan, or that God, that everything happens for a reason. And again, I just, theologically, I'm not sure that I agree with a lot of those things. I think that, bad things happen because we live in a fallen world. And, I think that God is a big God, and that he can take a really terrible thing and bring good things out of it. I hope that, that out of our tragedy, that I hope that, Love You Still can be some beauty from ashes, that we can be able to share our story, and that will help other people and bring awareness and those kinds of things. But I think sometimes we just get in such a rush to be able to help that sometimes we say things that are really kind of hurtful to other people. So, I think, instead of trying what I try to do now is, instead of trying to find something to say to make the person feel better, sometimes it's almost just better just to be quiet and to listen, and to say, I love you, and I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry that you're experiencing this. And then, let them talk, and let them say what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And, maybe that's hard. Maybe they'll say some things that are hard to hear. But I think also just being able to extend some grace, and to be able to say, I understand how you're, even saying I understand how you're feeling, I think is a difficult thing, because sometimes we say that, but we really don't understand what somebody else is feeling.
Maybe even I understand what you're saying, or
yeah, right, exactly. And so I think just kind of trying to be careful with that, and trying to just not bring judgment into it, and not bring those kinds of things. I think sometimes we get into trouble because we try to make sense of something that just doesn't make sense, and I don't think that, that I'll ever understand why this happened, at least until, maybe we get to heaven. And then I kind of think that it's going to be a non-issue at that time. But at any rate, I think we try to make people feel better, and we try to understand things that we can't really understand. We don't maybe even have the capacity to understand. And so I think if we can just give ourselves grace to recognize that, we can't do that I can't make somebody feel better. Grief is actually a healthy thing, and a person needs to be able to experience that, and, express that potentially, and just creating a safe place for them to be able to do that is really a beautiful gift. As far as things to say, I would say, being able to say their loved ones' names. And so being, I know for me, people who have said, I'm thinking about Julia today, or I saw a beautiful sunset and it made me think about Julia.
Yeah.
Just reminds me that people remember her, that people care about her. I know that sometimes people will say, oh, I don't want to make you cry, or I don't want to, bring up something, or make you think about something. And I just think, and I've, tried to kind of express that as like, no, you don't, like, I think about her all the time. Like,
Right.
there's never a moment when she's not on my mind. And so, but hearing her name from someone else's lips, or hearing how, her story has impacted them, is really a beautiful gift that you can give to someone who's hurting.
Absolutely. So it sounds like a lot of it too is sort of the just being there, and the just listening, and the, even if you don't exactly know the right thing to say, just saying, I'm here for you, or I'm here to listen, or just hugging them, or letting them cry, letting them scream, or do whatever it is that they need to do, to get out that grief. And
Right.
so I think that's a good point, that it's not always about, or it's frankly not about, like, coming up with the right phrase to say. It's more just the being there and letting someone know that you care and you love and support them. And I also think too that you also make a great point with, it's not as though, Julia is ever, not on your mind. So someone bringing her up to you, or again, telling you that they're thinking of her, that those really are good things, because it's that validation for you. And it's the, getting to hear other people say her name, and knowing that they care and that they remember. Because again, it's like, you're not hurting me by saying, her name. And if anything, you're probably helping me, by saying it. So
yes, very much so. Yes.
So what do you hope that Love You Still is able to do for people, for readers? So if someone's debating about picking this up, what would you say might be a reason for them to do so?
Well, I would say that there are a few reasons. I would say, I think there is power in hearing someone else's story. I think there's something very human about that, and I think that's why we like, you know, reality TV, or true crime documentaries, like whatever it is. I think it kind of gives us a glimpse into someone else's life. It kind of allows us vicariously to experience what they have, and for good or for bad. And so I think there's something just, again, very, very kind of human about that. And I think it also, I would say, I hope, creates a sense of empathy and awareness that, again, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. If you like Ben Tanzer, I don't know if you're watching, but like our story is unique, but also I think the power of Love You Still is that it's not completely unique. That there, again, 1 in 4 pregnancies in the United States end in loss. And so recognizing that our story, while I hope will help other people, is a story that probably, someone has experienced something similar, and or at least has experienced some of the same kind of feelings, and some kind of loss and things like that. And so I think being able to have just that awareness, I think, helps our society, and to kind of normalize that also. And to be able to have those conversations, and to be able to say, oh yeah, I read a book about that. And then maybe hopefully they would be able to, say things or do things or whatever that would be helpful, or at least to be able to understand someone else's perspective a little bit better. I hope that for grieving families, that they will be able to find a sense of solidarity, to feel a little bit less alone, and to recognize that they'll be able to hear the message. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And it's okay to grieve. It's okay to not be okay. And in fact, it's important. It's important to grieve. And we grieve because we loved, and because we love still. And so that death does not separate us from the bond that we have from our children and from our loved ones, and that we can continue to have this kind of enduring love for someone, and a hope as well that we will be reunited with them again. I hope that people will take from, our own experiences and our own, pregnancy after loss and crisis of faith and all of those things, to be able to recognize that, um, that these experiences are not unique to you, and that you can feel a sense of community with that. And I think that helps sometimes, at least to some small degree. And then I hope that also it will help people who are supporting other people who have experienced this kind of loss. The grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and the friends who just say, I have no idea what to say. I have no idea what to do. Like, I don't even know how this happened. And I think, I hope that our story, we receive so much amazing support from so many people, that I think we tried to just share in the book, that I hope that their examples will be able to help other people to know how important those things are to someone who has experienced a tragedy like this, and how much it's necessary too.
Absolutely. Well, great message. And would you like to share Julia's photo so that we can see it? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
So Maria had mentioned the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. Is it foundation? Is that the correct term?
It's a nonprofit organization.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And that these were volunteers, right? Who come.
Yep. So Kelsey Hansen is a volunteer photographer through Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And so she came in the middle of the night to the hospital to take pictures of Julia and of us. And so this is one of the pictures that she took.
There
so
we
this
go.
is
Yeah,
the.
there we can see.
Sorry.
Yeah, right there.
Can't see it. And so that was the outfit that we brought to bring her home in. And so we put her in that and took pictures. And then this one is kind of one of my favorites. This is the one that is in my my necklace as well. So.
And is it in the back of your book as well? I think
it is. It is, actually. So thank you very much to Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, and to Kelsey for giving us permission to share her picture. That was really important to me, and I'm very, very grateful to the organization for allowing us to do that.
Well, and just having those mementos again for families going through loss, I'm sure that is just so incredibly valuable, to have those photos of her and of you and your husband holding her and your family holding her. And that, again, those are, something, to be cherished for sure.
Absolutely. I've said often that it is the probably my most cherished tangible gift, because as much as you would like to think that you would never forget the details of her nose and her eyelashes and her face, human mind is just not designed to remember those things perfectly. So to be able to have these beautiful photographs is just a priceless gift. So forever grateful for that.
That's amazing. And I'm so thankful that you have those images, and that you have the necklace. That was kind of what originally sparked, some of our conversations. So that's really neat to kind of bring it back around to that point. And again, just making that person visible.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Those visible reminders.
Yes.
Well, the book is Love You Still, a Memoir. And I'm so grateful, Maria, that we had this time to talk about your book. And I hope that it does all of the things that you're hoping for, that it will do. It's a powerful book, powerful story, just beautifully written, and will definitely take you inside of a stillbirth experience and its aftermath. And so, again, Maria, I just want to thank you so much, just from the bottom of my heart, for you being so generous and open to come and talk, on live camera about this, and in such depth and detail, and with such honesty and candor and strength and courage. And so, I just love you so much.
Oh, I love you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I very, very much appreciate the invitation and oh, um, the friendship that we have, and that I just very much believe was divinely ordained. And I am just so grateful for you and for this opportunity.
Well, thank you again. And thanks everybody for being with us. And please go get Love You Still, and reach out to people who are grieving and in need of support. And we do this in honor of Julia Rachel Price, Maria's daughter. So thank you again, everybody, for watching this special episode, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.